Meal timing and frequency. So the reason why I've chose this topic today is I received a question on my Instagram stories yesterday asking how many meals a day this person should be having and what times of the day best to eat meals. Now, there's a lot of conflicting information out there online. So what I'm going to do today is summarize the evidence, my experience, and then give you some recommendations and what I'd recommend for meal timing and frequency. Now, who this is aimed for? This is aimed for the regular person who goes to the gym multiple times per week. If you're an elite level runner, if you're competing in sport, then some of these guidelines are going to appeal to you. And even for the regular guys who go to the guys and women who might be watching this, who go to the gym, you are going to have to modify some of these guidelines a little bit for yourself. But this is kind of just a bit of a summary of my experience, the research, and what I would recommend as well. Okay, so first and most important thing before we even get onto meal timing and frequency is what matters most is your end of day nutrient intake. So it doesn't matter about when you're having your meals and all that other stuff. Yes, there's, it's going to help you out with training and some other stuff we're going to come on to. But the most important thing is if you are looking at maintaining your weight, you're hitting your end day calorie intake. If you're looking at losing a weight, your end calorie intake is you're in your calorie deficit. If you are looking at gaining weight, then obviously you are in your calorie surplus, hitting your target at the end of the day. This stuff does not really matter unless that end stuff is in place. So remember, the end of day nutrient intake is the most important thing. Now, if that's in place and you're hitting your nutrient targets, whether that's calories, macros, fiber, whatever it is on a day-to-day basis, then we can start looking at some of these other layers that come into it. Okay, so consideration. So the first consideration, and I've not wrote this one down, is lifestyle. What does your job or your day-to-day allow you to do? Because it might be a case of if you're working a job, let's say from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m, you get one lunch break in there. So realistically, you can only have breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then maybe a snack afterwards. So you're looking at 4 meals per day. For some people, you might be working for yourself, so you might be able to have more meals throughout the day. Some people might be working offshore. There's going to be so many things that limit how many meals you can have per day. So obviously, lifestyle is the main factor. But once you've got your lifestyle in, so you know how many meals per day you can have, we're going to go through now kind of some of the optimal stuff around meal timing and frequency. So a lot of the evidence for protein suggests that when total protein intake for the day is distributed evenly every 3 to 5 hours that you are awake, then that would maximize protein synthesis. However, I am aware there was a study, I believe it was last year, where they looked at consuming 100 grams versus 25 grams, I believe it was, protein intake post-workout. And the 100 grams actually better for protein synthesis over a longer period. So there are going to be odd studies that conflict against it, but for most people, if you distribute your protein intake evenly every 3 to 5 hours, you're going to be in pretty safe hands, I'd say. The second thing we want to consider is workouts. Now, when I say pre and post, I am referring to carbohydrates here, not protein, because we're under the assumption that you're going to be distributing your protein intake evenly every 3 to 5 hours. If you're not, and if we're still talking about protein pre and post workout, you don't need to worry about the post anabolic window. You should just be looking to consume a good amount of protein within 90 minutes, either pre or post workout. But if you don't do that, it's not going to be detrimental and you're going to lose all your gains. But we want to be thinking about either pre or post, somewhere around 90 minutes, a good source of protein intake. Now, if we're going to move on to pre-workout and post-workout meals, and we're going to look at carbohydrates. For pre, I've put personal preference. Now, the reason why I've put personal preference is, from my experience of working with people, it just depends from person to person. I'm someone who likes to eat relatively close to my workouts. For me, I just like to go to the gym feeling a bit full. It's more of a psychological thing for myself. However, I appreciate there's some people who work out first thing in the morning and the last thing they want to be doing is having a big meal before going for a workout. There was actually a study I was looking at a couple of years ago where they were looking at pre-workout carbohydrates beforehand. And it was actually a bit more of a psychological thing of actually eating something and having the taste in your mouth, which is why people were often having like a banana or something light before a workout, because it was giving, again, that taste of carbohydrates that was giving them a boost for that workout. So for most people, again, like I mentioned, who are watching this video, are going to be your regular gym goers, you don't need to be having a pre-workout meal of carbohydrates, because as so long as you've hit your total end day carbohydrate target, then you should be fine for your workout. You don't need to be timing your carbohydrates beforehand for your workout if you are doing regular gym work. If you are going to the gym and lifting weights for 45 minutes to an hour or something like that. You don't really need to be timing your carbohydrates before if you're hitting your total end of day carbohydrate intake, because your glycogen stores should be full and ready to go. Similarly with your post-workout carbohydrates as well, for most people who are doing regular gym sessions, you won't need to replenish your glycogen stores so long as you're hitting that end day total carbohydrate target, because within that gym session, you are not going to be depleting your glycogen stores. So I think it's something that people place a bit too much emphasis on. And that's why I'm going back to the start of where we said, as long as you're hitting that total end day carbohydrate target, then it doesn't matter too much. And we've already spoke about protein, so long as you're having a big amount within 90 minutes, either pre or post-workout. The next thing I want to come into is consistency and habits. We want to be thinking about how many meals you can have per day on a consistent basis, because as much as you might be tracking your nutrition intake now, you might not be doing it forever. So we want to be thinking about trying to have similar meals or similar times on a day-to-day basis, because if we start adding more meals into that, that could mean that we're consuming more calories. We kind of want to get into a bit of a habit of roughly eating similar times of day on a similar basis so that we're building that consistency. Other consideration, fasting. I'm someone who likes to fast from time to time, especially when I'm dieting. So if you are fasting, that is a consideration you do need to put into obviously mealtime and frequency about skipping breakfast. Going back to our protein distributed evenly every 3 to 5 hours, personally, for most gym goers and people, I don't think it should be too much of an issue if you're not having protein first thing in the morning, unless you are obviously an advanced or elite level athlete. For most people, including myself, when I'm dieting, I personally prefer to skip breakfast, have my first meal at around midday. And that just allows me to backload my calories for the day, but that is not going to work for everyone. Okay, so they're the things we need to take into consideration. Now, let's look at the evidence. So what we often see typically is when people are having less than 3 meals a day, hunger can be an issue, because we're going to have to go long periods of the day between meals. We also got to take into consideration consistency might become a bit of an issue, because it might be a case of, okay, well, 2 days of the week you can go having 2 meals per day, but then that third day you get hungry, so you end up eating 3 or 4 meals, and then the next day you're having 5 meals because you're still hungry, and then you pull it back to 2. So you can see how we're losing that consistency. The other thing I'd also say is as well, having less than 3 meals per day, and this isn't going to apply too much to people who are dieting, but if you are in a gaining phase, for instance, myself now, I'm on 3,000 calories on a day-to-day basis. It's not a massive amount, but if I was to have 3,000 calories over 2 meals, that's 2 1,500 calorie meals. That's quite a lot of food to take in. And for me personally, I tend to find that once I start getting above 75, 80 grams of carbohydrates in a meal, that's where I start to crash and get a little bit tired, probably about 30 to 45 minutes onwards. So for me, I'd prefer to have more meals and spread it out. So typically, when we see less than 3 meals, hunger and consistency become a bit of an issue, and obviously you're having to have large meals. Now, when we look at the opposite side of things, and when we're looking at more than 6 meals in a day, what we tend to see is it's not filling enough because you're having lots and lots of small meals, and it's just a pain in the ass. It's inconvenient, especially if you're somebody who's got a job as well and you're trying to eat meals at work or something like that. It's just inconvenient. So what is my recommendation? So my recommendation is somewhere between 3 to 6 meals per day. And what I would do in those 3 to 6 meals is making sure that across those 3 to 6 meals, I'm hitting my total nutrition targets for the day. So my calorie target, macro target, fiber targets, whatever they are, I'd make sure I'm hitting those. Once I'm hitting those, what I would then look to do, I'd try to make sure that I'm having one of those meals either 90 minutes before or after my workout, so I'm helping maximize protein synthesis. But again, don't worry if you don't, you're not going to lose all your gains or anything like that. It's a minimal thing if we're hitting that end of day target. I wouldn't worry about replenishing my glycogen post workouts, because I don't think it's necessary for most people who are just doing regular gym sessions, so long as you're hitting that total carbohydrate intake for the day. Now, when I go into a fat loss phase, it might be a case of I go less meals because I'm going to consider doing fasting, so skipping breakfast and saving my calories for later in the day. Okay, so quickly to recap on this. This is meal timing and frequency, and this is for the average person who goes to the gym, who's working out, let's say 3 to 6 times per week. You're not an elite level athlete, you're not an elite level bodybuilder or anything like that, you're just a regular strength or power athlete. I would recommend first that you hit your total daily nutrition targets first. That is the first and most important thing. So once you're hitting your calorie, macro, fiber, whatever goals are, that is the most important thing. I would then look at spreading that over 3 to 6 meals per day. Within those 3 to 6 meals per day, I would look at distributing protein evenly every 3 to 5 hours. I just make sure with the pre and post workout that you're having one of those meals either 90 minutes before or after you work out. I would try and build in that you are consistent with your meal timings on a day-to-day basis, and then this is going to be a habit for yourself. So eventually when you do move away from tracking your nutrition intake, you're just into a good habit of knowing when your meals are. If you're in a fat loss phase, I would recommend fasting. That's just something I like to do. There's no magic benefit to it. It's just a way of managing your calories better by saving them for later in the day, but this doesn't work for everybody. Okay guys, hopefully that's helped out with meal timing and frequency and made you realize that it's probably not as important as some people like to place emphasis on. Again, if you've got any questions on this, please leave them in the comments below or shoot me a message on Instagram.